Well, welcome back to Westminster as Jeremy Corbyn faces the biggest test of his leadership less than a year after he was elected to office. Overnight, he sacked his shadow Foreign Secretary, Hilary Benn, after a phone call in which Mr Benn said he had lost confidence in Mr Corbyn's leadership. Now a total of 7 people have left the shadow cabinet after a series of resignations this morning. But Labour sources close to Mr Corbyn say that he is determined to stay on as the party's leader. Well, let's bring in Labour MP Frank Field. Talk about Corbyn first of all, shall we? Should he stay or should he go, do you think?
I think he should go. What Jeremy got right was half the message. And that message was very clearly expressed, particularly in Labour seats during the referendum, that this great game of globalisation has losers. And the losers had a chance to speak, and they spoke very clearly. And in trying to articulate what the losers feel, Jeremy's been rather good, although he's...
Hold that thought. Let's just take you 2 pictures from North London. Jeremy Corbyn is leaving. Let's have a listen.
Thanks for coming by today.
Corbyn,
thank you very much.
As leader? Have you lost
Thank you very much.
party?
Thank you very much.
What have you got to say about the resignation?
Laura.
He's getting into the car.
You're going to resign, Jeremy?
Someone else is coming. Thanking the police who are here.
You're going to stand down?
No word from him. Clear the road. Clear the road. Now for him, whether...
So he drives off, doesn't he? Not many words there from him. Pressure is on him, of course, including from people, as we were just hearing from you. You were explaining why you thought he should go.
Well, I mean, what he didn't say there, but he's actually said this morning, that he's going nowhere. I mean, that's the problem. He's going nowhere. We may have an election later on this year, and we've actually got to be in a position to win it. And although Jeremy has got the issue right, that is the big numbers who lose from globalisation, he has no set of policies, and indeed clothes that key issue with a load of old claptrap, which either sends the electorate weeping one way or laughing in the other direction. So I think this will come to a head on the parliamentary party on Monday evening, and it looks as though we'll be able to have a vote on Tuesday. It's totally proper that Jeremy will stand in that contest, but I hope and fervently believe that during that contest, as always with contests, leaders emerge. People you didn't expect step up to the plate and surprise one. And it's desperately important for Labour that somebody surprises us in this leadership contest.
You say that there are losers in globalisation. Does it not rapidly look as though the UK is about to be a loser? Obviously, questions about the reunification of Ireland, Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon being very determined to hold instant meetings with the European Commission, prospects of a second referendum in Scotland, which may well now be supported because the UK itself has changed. We will be a very small country in a very big world with not much power and influence.
Well, the size of the world won't change. But I'm not pessimistic, as you are, with those sets of questions. The key players that we need to watch are the German Chancellor and the Finance Minister. They clearly now want to have serious negotiations. And I think the Prime Minister's done 2 good things. One, he said that he's staying on until the autumn, which gives a period of stability. And secondly, he has no intention of beginning the clock about the renegotiations. And during this 4-month period, the Tory party can try and sort themselves out, while we try and sort ourselves out on the Labour side. What I think is very important to get the message over, this country wants a successful series of renegotiations with Europe, not to spite Europe, but so that there is a success for Europe, as they will be a success here. And the key players, the world power in the European Union is beginning to move.
The key question, though, here is stability. Stability for the UK and stability for the European Union. We've had the founding fathers of the EU coming forward saying Britain's got to act and act swiftly. We've had the Parliament President coming out, the EU Parliament President coming out saying act swiftly. Jean-Claude Juncker come out, act quickly.
All of these,
are we happy to ignore all of those
course,
people?
Absolutely. They're all unelected, massive pay, massive pensions, and they are frightened about their jobs. One would expect them to behave like this in these circumstances. There is no way they can bully us into starting the clock until the government makes a formal submission to do so. And it's quite clear we're not going to do that until the autumn. I think that is the right timetable. And during that time, we should get very clearly to Europe, we want this to be a success. Who knows at the end of the renegotiations where we'll be or where Europe Europe should be. A key point we must get across is the British public, by a very large margin, it wasn't a small one, a large margin have decided to start the negotiations to leave.
I'm speaking
Our aim is not to actually bring down the European Union. I know they've got real problems, and a lot of their political leadership are fearful that their populations will demand and do precisely what the British population has done. But that's not in our interest to do that. Any change in Europe we want to have in a slow and orderly fashion, and we should begin that process by saying we'll be coming back to you with the beginnings of our negotiations in the autumn. We may not even then start the clock for Brexiting.
Okay. We've had lots of people say from the Leave campaign there have been no real implications yet. No, the pound wobbled, but it's fine. You know, the markets will correct themselves and so on. I was speaking to people yesterday, construction industry, instant recruitment freeze. Instant. Many companies are not taking on staff. Talk that parts of the city will move. Friends of mine who work in senior positions in banks in the city say they will have to move staff out of London. There is a direct impact on jobs. Who will be affected most? Perhaps those Labour supporters that came out to vote for the UK to leave. Are you not concerned about any of that?
Of course,
the prospect of a recession?
I'm concerned about all of those things. But if there's actually a freeze on recruitment, that will actually affect the immigration figures. So that will actually be a plus. But if we go back in our history to these great points of crisis, we look in 1940, the whole establishment gang was for selling out to Hitler. And Churchill and the working class together decided that wasn't going to happen. And what happens with the pound, I think it's rather good the pound's gone down, because that will actually help exports.
But we are a nation of consumers. I'd like to point out we're actually a nation of importers.
Yes. No,
you're not worried about importers? You're not worried about the price of our supermarket goods going up?
Our long-term problems with our trade balance is clearly an issue associated with an overvalued pound. These things, markets go up and down. I think we actually just have to keep our nerve. I know you're only doing it to actually start a good old argument here, but the truth is, come Monday morning, the markets will start to adjust to what has actually happened. And the truth is, at the moment, nothing is happening. Nothing will happen to the autumn. We need to use between now and the autumn to set the stage that these are negotiations which we want a success for Europe and we want a success for this country. From our side, it's not going to be spiteful, and the key players, as I emphasised earlier, Mrs. Merkel and her Chancellor have already begun to move, and what Germany does, usually in the end, that's what the European Union does.
Frank Field here saying that there has been no economic earthquake. Let's see if there's been a political earthquake, bringing Ian Murray, Shadow Scottish Secretary, who has resigned. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Why have you done it?
I just feel the party needs leadership and direction at this time. We are barely in opposition, let alone a government in waiting, and we need fresh direction so we can speak to a much wider coalition of people in the country, deal with the big issues that the people have told us they want dealt with on Thursday, come up with a positive policy platform that allows us to address those big issues. And I just feel that, having said that to Jeremy Corbyn and Shadow Cabinet on Friday, I could no longer be part of that team, and I think resigning on that basis is the right thing to do.
Do you partly blame him for the fact that the UK voted to leave the European Union?
I'm not sure we should be apportioning blame. What I do blame is the Prime Minister for gambling on the UK's future and losing to fix his own party. So I thoroughly blame the Prime Minister for getting into this mess, but everyone's got to take their share of the blame. In Scotland, we've had a 62% in favour of remaining in the European Union. In my own constituency, 78%. Many parts of the UK voted either heavily for or heavily against. The country is divided, it's split, and it's up to politicians to come together and resolve that in the best interests of working people in this country.
I'll rephrase my question then. Did Jeremy Corbyn do enough, do you think, to get the Labour vote out in support of Remain?
I don't think he was as strong on why we need to stay in the European Union. I don't think he was strong enough on dealing with the concerns that people were legitimately telling us on the doorsteps. And I don't think he really dealt with this issue as a leader should. And I think since the vote on Friday morning going against the Remain side, the response has been at best tepid, and I think the country will have seen that. And we really do need now for the Labour Party to step up under new leadership in case we have a general election in 6 months or even in 2020. We're barely ready for opposition. I'm not sure we're ready for government, and that's why I've resigned.
You are Scotland's only Conservative MP.
Labour MP.
Labour MP.
It's a real difference, you know. It's very special.
Yes, the question I was going to say is that we've now heard strong moves suddenly from Nicola Sturgeon of the SNP that it is time for another referendum in Scotland. Do you think, just hearing that there's been another resignation actually from the Labour Party, I'll just get that name in a moment, sorry about that. Seema Malhotra, she has also resigned, Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Another one, do you think this is getting more significant by
I do think it's getting more significant, and I do think that, I mean, I'm not the best to comment on this, but Nicola Sturgeon, if she actually wants to renegotiate independence with the price of oil as it is, what will actually happen to the Scottish economy? I'm quite confident that we actually had another vote within the framework, because we've got to have a new political settlement. I mean, the Scottish Parliament is a model for, we want an English Parliament, we want an Irish one, and we want a Welsh one, grouped together in a common Senate.
The point I was going to
but
make
the
to you,
idea that she could carry a vote is, I think, absolutely absurd, given the state of the way that and let's be truthful, the English prop up the Scottish economy.
Ian Murray.
Well, I think Nicola Sturgeon's right to look at all the aspects of how Scotland can stay within the benefits of the European Union. Scotland overwhelmingly voted to remain. We always knew that was going to be the case. It's disappointing that the political discourse in Scotland seems to be now swamped by talking about another independence referendum rather than looking at the issues that Scotland has to deal with to make sure we maximise what we have left of a relationship with the European Union. Labour as a party want Scotland to stay within the UK and the UK to stay within the EU because we believe that working together is the best way to resolve the problems that everyone has. And I think what we need to do is support Nicola Sturgeon in those discussions and that debate. But I don't think we should be talking about a second independence referendum because, as Frank says, all the issues that were discussed in September 2014 at the last independence referendum are actually made much, much worse after Thursday's decision rather than easier.
The point I was going to make to you, Frank Field, as somebody who supported Brexit, some people who voted for leave seem to be a little bit surprised that now there's questions about whether parts of the UK will fracture off. Did you not make that clear? I mean, the accusation of Project Fear prevented some of these discussions being made clear, do you think?
Well, I didn't do Project Fear. I thought I agree with Ian that the Prime Minister's stance was absurd. If he thought we were going to have a third world war and 7 years of pestilence, why the hell did he give a vote in the first place?
No, but I'm saying that he was being criticised for outlining things that might happen, including the refracturing of the United Kingdom.
All the way through, I tried to talk about the risks of staying and the risks of leaving. One of the risks of leaving was how it would fracture elsewhere. I don't accept your view about Ireland. I think in time we will see Ireland following our lead and leaving and seeking a new arrangement. I don't think people want a sort of an independence. There's going to be a regrouping of the European Union, and I think it's quite proper that the old unelected...
Just one final word with Ian, if you don't mind. Do you think there will be a second referendum in Scotland, and do you think the Scots will vote to leave the UK this time?
I don't think I can possibly answer those two questions at the moment. It makes it more likely there will be a second referendum, but at this stage I think all options should be explored to make sure that Scotland can stay within the EU, but we want it also to stay within the UK. And can I just pick up very briefly this point about Project Fear? It wasn't Project Fear, it's Project Fact. A very good university friend of mine who's a major contributor and analyst in the city has said that we haven't just seen the start of it yet in terms of what's going to happen. This is people's pensions, savings and livelihoods, and to just dismiss all of that is Project Fear, I think, is a dereliction of duty.
Ian Murray, Labour Shadow Secretary of State for Scotland. Until a moment, I was going to get that bit right. Thank you both very much to you. Frank Field as well, thank you. Michael Heseltine, Tory grandee, coming up after the break. Don't go away.